one. And she got a master's in electrical engineering from CU. She did? And she's working for my son, boy guy. You still got crackers? Yes. No, it was, I think her bachelor's was, we can't find them around here. And then she was.
put it on now. Yeah. Oh, it's on the spotlight. That's just set your home water. Okay, go to the front desk. It's email that's kind of highlights what's going on in the area. And one of the things is yeah. I'm like the board, right? Yeah. Hey Diane, I'm trying to get started here, and you just keep talking with one person after the other. Everyone got a seat? Okay, let's pray. Name the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Thank you, Lord, for giving us your life. Give your love and your Give them our own. Bless us. Word. For all of it. We ask the ways your way. Lord, okay, we're in Mark chapter 12. We're looking at 12:38. Michelle. Mark, yeah. And in this teaching, he said, beware of the scribes who like to go about in long robes and to have salutations in the marketplaces and the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor, who devour widows' houses for a pretense of long prayers. They will receive great honor. And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the multitude put money in the treasury. Many received it and put in large sums. And the poor widow put in copper coins. And he called his disciples together and said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing. For they all contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put everything together. Old living put in everything. This sums up Jesus' public ministry. It ends right here in chapter 12. Am I not on? Huh?
It's weird. It's showing that you're live. So maybe that's...
Okay, here's the question I want you to talk about at your tables for a few minutes. Don't be obstreperous. I want you to talk about the fact that this is the end of the section on discipleship and Jesus teaching his disciples. Now, you see at the very end in this story, Jesus takes his disciples aside one more time and he says, see this widow, etc., etc. So what is this particular passage to teach us about being a disciple of Jesus? Okay? Now, again, what does this passage that we've just read, 38 through the end of 44, what does this teach us about being disciples of Jesus? Okay? Go. What's it teaching us?
Does it include the first section?
I'm not going to tell you that, but it should.
They might have different messages, but they can do Yeah, she didn't give it to the board. The reason I say that is I get this daily meditation about readings, and there's a bishop in LA, Thomas Short, commentary on the gospel. Similar passage as this one. And he made that point. Most people interpret giving your all.
Saturday explicitly the first section where he says the scribes. This would have probably just lost me. Big and I are very busy.
They get a percentage.
Yes.
I didn't want to tell you that.
I know.
Three
I don't want his voice. What I said is it's completely opposite.
Never been the interpretation that I've ever heard.
No, I agree. It's not. Yeah, especially if I
So the scribes like the way around.
you might have been cynical with
You think? But maybe that hampers us. Does Jesus want us to
Well, would you keep Who's got some great insights? Great insights about being a disciple from this gospel passage. A great insight. Yeah, go ahead.
We talk about there's more to treasure than just money.
Yeah,
We use the term a lot, time, talent, and treasure.
yeah,
Giving of your time is definitely a treasure.
yeah.
And a talent that you have, whether it's singing or whatever, reading, praying the rosary, things like that. So I think we need to realize there's more to treasure than just money.
So what are we learning about discipleship? Then put it in that frame of reference. Discipleship, therefore, is
giving your all?
giving of your all.
Giving of yourself.
Giving of yourself. Okay? Is it all yourself? Do you hear that in this particular passage, that this woman gives all herself?
Yes.
Yeah, and this is a good thing? This is disciple.
Being honest.
Who said no? Margaret?
It wasn't me this time. It wasn't me.
Do you want to explain?
I just don't think we can give everything that we have. We have to keep so much to live on.
Yeah.
In this day and age. Didn't you say?
In this day and age, do you think it's any different in that day and age?
No.
I think so. I think so.
You think it'd be easier in those days to give up everything you had and follow Jesus?
I think at one time you told us this woman this was her only possessions and she was going to die.
Yeah.
So she gave it. Did you say that?
No, I never said that.
When we're close to dying,
Discipleship should not be complicit in a corrupt, organized system.
Wow. Say more.
Well, the first part.
Yeah, the first
strikes
part.
me as so reflective of much of organized religion,
Mm-hmm.
that it devolves into a series of pretends, or you're supposed to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, looked at it one way, the widow may be part of that system because she's been duped.
Okay. She's been duped. Did anyone see that? No?
take advantage of others.
So
Take advantage.
you know what? One of the things that you need to notice in this particular gospel passage is Jesus does not praise the woman. He does not praise her. So if he was like touting her as an example of beautiful discipleship, would he not say, you know, look at this, how good this woman is, that she's given of her very self. Instead, he says, look at this widow. And according to the system that she's stuck in, she thinks that she needs to give not just her last two, not just a penny, but the last two that she has. She could have given one, and that would have been an enormous gift on her part, but she puts in both, and therefore has impoverished herself. She has nothing because she gave her last penny.
Yeah, but she's trusting. She's trusting that God will take care of her.
And so you think that that's good.
Well, that's faith, isn't it?
I don't know. Margaret says we have to keep things aside for ourselves to take care of ourselves.
Well, it wasn't long ago in one of the Gospels, Jesus said, give up everything and follow me. If you
Yeah.
want to be a true disciple, give it up.
Yeah.
That's giving up everything.
Yeah, but did he say that to that man, or did he say that to you and I?
Well, he said it to that particular man at that time, and the possibility of discipleship with him.
Yeah. So what does that ask of me?
Well, I don't know that we have to give up everything, but it definitely tells you to prioritize.
So you're in the Margaret camp. We don't have to give up everything.
Probably, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it would be hard to do.
All right.
Why is he not praising her?
Why is he not praising her? Because she's a victim in a system. Do you see that? So the system he's challenging is that these scribes coax widows to give their last money, their houses, their resources to support them and the religious structures. So there's a couple, I mean, this could go either way, honestly, because this section is about discipleship, but this section is also a series of conflict stories with Jewish hierarchical church. Okay? So the question then is Jesus condemning the hierarchical Jewish religion because it has built this woman out of her last 2 cents? Or is he praising her because she's a great disciple and has given everything for the cause of the gospel?
Well, maybe nothing. Maybe if he's not praising the woman, then he's shaming the others who have other men.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's obvious by the first part.
Right.
Yeah. Margaret.
Well, I think the teaching part was, he says, be aware of the scribes in their long robes. Be aware to them of the visual assessment. What did you see going on here? Did you saw a woman giving her last? Wow, that's okay. And the others giving and making a lot of noise. So it sounds like they're doing it. But
Yeah.
just be aware of what you're going to assess when you see all these people. They're either parading or being first or being noticed, or are they being humble enough to give their money and give what they have?
So what then? That's very good. So what is Jesus teaching us about being a good disciple?
Be aware of what's going on.
Be aware of what's going on.
Around us and
Okay.
how we react to what is going on.
So if this teaching about the scribes in their long robes is authoritative, I kind of agree with you. I think there's a lot of, now be careful and watch what happens when people are self-interested and look at them and see their,
Remember when we were in Jerusalem, they're still doing it. They were.
well, yeah, but it's,
They were parading around us and had their big hats and their little things.
were they asking you for money?
No, but they watched us an awful lot.
Did you? There's lots of places is to donate money in the Holy Land, by the way. If you want to donate money over there, I'm not of that ilk, but
Well, I look at the last sentence from it where it's not, it says, she contributed all she had, her whole livelihood. So it's not necessarily saying that she maybe only gave her money. It's more than that. It was her whole livelihood, which to me goes back to, was it last week talking about the first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and love your soul. I related that back to that.
so she's actually fulfilling that commandment by her gift of her very self. Actually, it's interesting, this at verse 44, look at verse 44. They all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in, now my translation says, everything she had. Does anyone have something different? All she had? This is the translation that I wanted to highlight. She put in her whole life. That's what the Greek says. Okay, she put in her whole life. So then the question is, I mean, at the end of all of this, and there's all kinds of opinions about this, so that you understand that in scriptural circles, there are different opinions about this particular story. Some have seen this story of the widow as an appendix, that somehow it just got tacked on to the end of the gospel. I see it as very much integrated with what goes on before it, and that this is a real challenge to authoritative religion that uses people or kind of cajoles people into losing their very livelihood because they think this is what God wants. And there might be a warning in here about not just giving of everything that you are, but also being responsible for yourself, taking care of yourself and making sure that you don't put yourself in a position. I mean, this woman in the end is going to be dependent upon the Jewish synagogue so that she can survive, or she's not going to survive. Now that she's given everything away, is that what Jesus wants? That people become dependent upon upon their synagogue or upon their temple and, have given away everything? I don't know. There's certainly a profound example here of somebody trusting and somebody virtuous and somebody who wants to do the right thing. But there's also this question of, is this the right thing? So you don't have to give everything. Devin.
I never thought about this, but I appreciate it. So is Jesus trying to say, as disciples, we need to help people like this? Trying to bring them truth?
Probably, although it doesn't say that. But I would say, in the path of discipleship, this self-giving needs to be, you need to teach people to be self-giving and self-loving at the same time. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, so that they're not taken advantage of by a system, a corrupt system. Yeah.
I think in the scripture, Jesus is giving us a contrast. Here's the people that think highly of themselves. This is how they give. They want to show off. They want to have lots of people see them.
Yeah.
They want to be in their beautiful outfits. But here's the way. This is the one. This woman here, she's doing it the right way.
But you don't see a problem. You don't see a problem with this woman making herself poor.
We don't know. You're assuming all that. We don't know beyond the end of the scripture.
Well, when you give everything that you have and you give your whole life, there isn't a whole lot left to live on.
But maybe she had something coming in the next day.
Yeah, the welfare check's in the mail.
Go back to verse 40 that says they devour widows' houses.
Yeah.
Is that
There's a connection. Yeah, that's the connecting link between the scribes' misbehavior, and therefore let me give you an example of how the scribes have eaten this woman's set of belongings. Yeah. Did you have a question, Tyler?
I had a comment, but I can't remember it.
Okay.
Father, what do you make of the fact that the second teaching is only to his disciples, whereas the first teaching was to the crowd?
Mm-hmm.
If that second teaching was so important, why not to the crowd?
That's a good question. What do you think?
I think that emphasizes that the first teaching is the main point, and he didn't want it confused.
Okay. All right, but I like what Devin said in the idea that maybe the disciples had to learn from Jesus that this is a corrupt system, and that wasn't a political politically advantageous statement to make to the whole crowd. Rather, just look at how these guys parade around. Okay. Yes.
I may be about to step into it, but.
Uh-oh.
We went to visit in France about a year or two before COVID anyway. And I was very troubled by the lack of fondness for the Catholic Church. I mean, they really do not have any fondness for the Catholic Church. And you look at the history, and it kind of ties into that. You had a hierarchy that took advantage of the people and were very wealthy and separated from the people. And our church at times in history has fallen into that very trap that they're talking about.
Sure.
And it's still it's still consequential today. I mean,
sure.
It's carried over to this present.
Yeah. That's why Angie gives me so much money all the time. She thinks she's going to buy her way into heaven. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, we have basically put heaven on sale. Okay, you want heaven? This is what you need to do. You need to donate 10% of your income to the church, and maybe, a side gift to the priest or once in a while or something. And, you'll have treasure in heaven. So we can use this to manipulate people. And
his birthday's next week.
That's not to manipulate anyone. So you're absolutely right. There's a warning here for the church today. Yeah. Katie?
No,
Oh, okay. All right, let's dig in a little bit. So, in his teaching, he said, beware of the scribes. You all know who the scribes are, right? The lawyers. And their job was to interpret the law and to kind of help people apply the law. So their job, and the scribes arose in the time after the Babylonian captivity. So we're talking about a very late addition to the hierarchy of Israel. So after the Babylonian captivity, around the year 500 to 300, in that range, you have the beginning of a number of new ministries in the life of the people. And the reason the scribes grew up is because the religion that was centered around the temple before the Babylonian captivity, worship, sacrifice, offerings around the temple, because the temple was destroyed and that whole ritual sacrificial tradition waned because the people were taken off to Babylon and they didn't have a temple, they began to focus on, and as they focused on the law instead of the sacrificial ritual traditions, they began to see that the law in itself could be the fulfillment of Judaism. It could be the complete observation of Judaism as long as we take the law to heart as best we can. And so you have a new class of people rise up who have studied the law and can now apply it to our lives and help us live the law as best we can. So it went from a religion of sacrifice and ritual to a religion of the book, a religion of the law. Okay? Not a bad transition, but it is quite striking, quite a difference in terms of the makeup of this religion. So the scribes filled a role in the culture and were honored as kind of quasi-clergymen. They weren't technically clergymen, but as time grew on, they became respected like clergymen. So remember that there was a whole class of priests involved in Israel's story as well, and they were more the clergy, whereas scribes were more the legal experts. All right, but they began to be relied on more and more by the Jewish people. They go about in long robes. This is a reflection on the Talit. The Talit is a prayer shawl worn by pious Jews, and it's the one that has the tassels on it. So Jesus talked about the tassels on somebody's cloak and wearing long tassels. So this idea of tassels and robes is a showpiece worn. It was supposed to be worn under the garments as a reminder of your own piety and your own adherence to the law. But because it began to take on larger sizes and more showy appearances, it began to be worn on the surface of things. So the long robes, the salutations, the tassels, and so on and so forth that are enhanced, along with salutations in the marketplaces. Salutations are meant to express the idea of extended honor. Oh, your grace. It is so beautiful to have you in my presence, and to kind of go on effusively with praise and to make sure that everyone knew that you were giving honor to this man. Okay, don't see a lot of that today, but and then the best seats. The best seats in the synagogue. Okay, y'all know the difference between synagogue and No. Sabina, you've only been coming to this about 8 years. I teach it every year. Synagogues, I do. Synagogues are the local gathering places for the Jewish people to read Torah, to pray, and to have public meetings. Synagogues were usually filled with men. Women stood at the door or in the balcony. Okay? Then the temple, and there was only one. The temple was in Jerusalem. And the temple was where sacrifices were offered. So the sacrifices of grain and the sacrifices of livestock, that took place there at the temple. So if you wanted to really be in with God, you did more than simply attend the synagogue services. You actually brought an offering to the temple. And that was a considerable effort, especially if you're living in Galilee. It means a 75-mile commute one way by foot. And so you're going to be dragging an ox or kind of not dragging an ox, but leading an ox all the way down to Jerusalem, or you buy it at the temple. And so this is where you get money changers in the temple. You could not bring Roman money or Syrian money into the temple. It had to be Hebrew money. And so if you were going to make an offering into the what is it called? The glazophylakion, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. The glazophylakion, it had to be Hebrew money. And so you had money changers there who, for a little bit of interest, would change your money so that they would take your Roman money and they'd give you Hebrew money so you can make the offering. Same thing with the animals. The animals that you brought were probably going to be judged as, this is okay, but, it would really please God if you brought a lamb that didn't have a black mark on its side. And we have some for sale right here. And I can make you a nice deal for one of these, and you wouldn't have to give that blemished lamb to the Lord. And of course, you're going to say, well, I got to have God grant my petitions, so I'm going to buy one of your lambs because I know it's good, and God's going to be pleased with it. Bilk, another way to bilk. So that's why Jesus got mad and threw out the money changers and so on and so forth in the temple area. Synagogues, local, temple, one, Jerusalem. Okay? So if the seats of honor in the synagogue, if the idea is that the synagogue presents to you the scrolls of the Word of God, then somebody at a scroll stand is leading the synagogue people in their understanding of the Word. The seats of honor were behind and up front, so that everyone else is facing this way or this way. But these guys, the seats of honor, are looking at everyone else, and they're being seen. And that's the most important thing, that they get recognized, that they get seen, that people acknowledge, oh yeah, that's Scribe so-and-so, and he's got a lot of authority. And so to be seen, to be recognized, to be honored in a seat of the synagogue or seats at banquets. Where were the seats of honor at banquets? Yeah, next to the host, the seats of honor. On the one on my right and one on my left, just like James and John, who want, when he comes into his kingdom, give us the seats at the banquet.
The wealthy people, they had their certain seats with horse blankets in the winter to get warm.
Yeah.
And the other people, they got to sit well.
Yeah, you could see that in churches back east. I don't know how prevalent it was out here, but for sure, some of the older churches back east, they have pews that are, pews dedicated to those who made a significant contribution. Now give them a stained glass window. But you can't keep it. It's got to go in the church.
Where, in the Gospels, when they talked about the rich man, and Jesus said, give away all you have and come follow me. Could not this story of the widow have been inserted in that part of the
gospel? Put it there. Yeah. Because remember, folks, the Gospels are edited from pieces. So when Mark decides to structure his gospel this way, he's taken this piece and this piece and this piece, this story, this group of sayings, and he's constructing a sort of flow. And so where he put this story is actually could be arbitrary in terms of how does it relate to the chronology of Jesus' life. It may have happened in the first year of his ministry, but it fits well in this particular context of discipleship and conflict. So
in doing that, fundamentally, couldn't they be changing the message that Jesus was trying to give over his lifetime, to take certain passages out of the context they were chronologically and putting them in another place?
Yeah, but we don't have the chronology. So there's nothing authoritative that we can go back to and say, oh, he misplaced this piece. We don't, for all we know, Mark could be absolutely accurate in the way he placed these pieces. We don't know that. And so all we have originally is the way the story circulated and the fact that they eventually have changed it. Doubtful, because they were so insistent on making sure that people understood the truth. They weren't interested in their own opinion. They weren't interested in coloring these things. They wanted people to know who Jesus Christ was. And so they probably did their best to be true and faithful to what they had received. And in fact, you see that in Luke's gospel. Luke begins his gospel by saying, I know that the faith that you have received, Theophilus, is genuine and true, but I have taken it upon myself to put these things in a better order so that it may increase and help you to understand that Jesus Christ is the Lord. So we see that method is actually a part of Luke's theology. He's telling them, this is what I'm doing. I'm putting this in the order that I think is going to help you best understand who Jesus is. And that's the way all the Gospels are written.
Could the discipleship lesson also be one looking at the scribes? If you're going to be a disciple, don't stand on the street corner and say, look at me.
Sure.
And you be like the widow and give all that you can
Yeah.
to the disciples.
Yes. Yes, that's very true. That could also be part of Jesus' method, Jesus' meaning here. Okay, so let's go on. They devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. So a widow who had a house was fortunate because widows usually are not left with anything. If their husband dies, the inheritance goes to the sons. And so the son has to decide to take the mother in. But the wife could be childless and therefore would inherit the property. But she's being coached by the religious leaders. If you want to go to heaven, if you want to be saved, you've got to give more. You could give a little bit more. What are you doing with that big house all by yourself? You could be living with your daughter-in-law, and you could, give that to God, and it would be a beautiful gesture, and God would love you all the more for it. And so that's the devouring. They devour the houses of widows. They take them, and in exchange, they offer a prayer. I'll pray for you, What?
Sorry, big one.
Big one. Well, I won't go to you for your house. Okay. He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the multitude putting money in large sums of putting money into the treasury. Many people put in large sums. The treasury there. Where's my marker? It's this wonderful word. Glazophylakion. Use that in your next conversation. Glazophylakion. These were specially made treasury deposit boxes. I think there were 6 of them. And they were shaped like this. So they were shaped like this. We're looking at a cutaway view. And the point was that the coins would go down here. But the point was these were created so that the coins would circulate in the bronze fixture and make lots of noise. Going in there, all you had, the way the coins went down, it made a lot of sound. So Jesus doesn't know that the woman has put in 2 small coins. He hears the fact that she's put in 2 small coins down, and it's very light compared to what the other people are giving. So the idea is that, this is just this is a showpiece. This is just to embarrass those who are giving small amounts and to
We pointed out to his disciples that this poor woman is
but yes, he's acknowledging her great He's acknowledging her life. But there's an implicit question underneath that. Is that what this is really all about? Is that what we're supposed to do? Or is she not caring about this woman who gave everything away? You know, I see it just, it could be interpreted that way. But it's not absolutely. Yes.
I guess they've always interpreted.
We all have.
But then Bob has read something. This is an expert.
Yeah.
And then we read because people are
Yeah, then you begin to say, oh, wait a minute.
I think it was Amina that said that she heard once that the widow was dying.
Yeah.
And it made me think of a homily a couple of years ago, not from you, but someone else, that I'm new to the church. He was asking the congregation, and I kind of agree with him, he's like, folks, don't give your money away, you will, to your children. Give it to the church, because they're going to squander it away in a couple of years. Do something useful for God with your money when you die.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you go to the nursing homes, how many children even visit their parents? When they're in the nursing home, probably no one.
Yeah.
You know, but I guess I agree with that, but this scripture made me think, be careful how you give.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what Jesus would say. Be careful how you give. Be careful.
I was also told that you can write on your check exactly what you want your money to be used for. So maybe that's a way of protecting the money you give.
Yeah, we don't abide by that.
Oh, you don't? Okay. That's in Texas.
No, yeah, you say you give your money to the church has the discretion of how to use that. Okay. That's what you pay us for.
But, yeah, I think it's a good idea.
To designate on your check what you want the money?
No, I mean to give it to the church.
Yeah. Give it to the church. Trust the community that it's going to do good things with your resources.
So anyway, I just wanted to hear what he said about that.
Can I help you, Pam? Now, this series of stories went out for a cigarette or what? Yeah. This circle of stories involves conflict with the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel brought Baal worship. Baal is the Canaanite god, creator, Lord. Baal literally means Lord. And she brought Baal worship into Israel. And so Ezekiel has to kind of confront her, and God tells Ezekiel that there's going to be a drought. And this drought is because Elijah can control the rain. Now, rains are very seasonal in Israel. They come between November and March. So that's That's the rainy season or the winter. The rest of the year, there's little rain. So we're hearing about November, December, January, February, March, 5 months in which the land is dependent upon rain. But Elijah controls the rain because God has given him control over the rain in Israel for this time. And this time, there is no rain. And this forces people to kind of dire situation because they have no food. Elijah recognizes this, but he hopes that Ahab will change back to proper worship so that this doesn't continue. So in the middle of this drought, God sends him to the widow of Zarephath, which is the story we have today. He is in a wadi, a dry stream bed, being fed by ravens, and God gives him the message, I want you to go to this widow in Zarephath. Zarephath is in Sidon. So if we look at Israel, this is Sidon up here. It's in modern-day Lebanon. So Zarephath is just south of Sidon, and it's on the coast there. And this story kind of amplifies this kind of prophet in this wonderful way with this widow. Now, the story is basically, I hope you, did you read it? Okay, well then let's read it together. After some time, I'm at verse 6. No, I'm at verse 7. I know it starts at 10, but I'm starting at 7. After some time, however, the wadi ran dry because no rain had fallen in the land. So the word of the Lord came to him. Arise, go to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have commanded a widow there to feed you. He arose and went to Zarephath. When he arrived at the entrance of the city, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called out to her, please bring me a small cup of water to drink. She left to get it, and he called out after her, please bring along a crust of bread. She said, as the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked. There is only a handful of flour in my jar and a little oil in my jug. Just now I was collecting a few sticks to go in and prepare something for myself and my son, and when we have eaten it, we shall die. Elijah said to her, do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. First make me a little cake and bring it to me. Afterwards you can go and prepare something for yourself and your son. For the Lord, the God of Israel, says, the jar of flour shall not go empty, nor the jug of oil run dry, until the day when the Lord sends rain upon the earth. She left and did as Elijah had said. She had enough to eat for a long time, he and she and her household. The jar of flour did not go empty, nor the jug of oil run dry, according to the word of the Lord spoken through Elijah. Okay, now let me ask you this question. Why the focus on widows? We got a widow in the gospel and a widow in this particular story. Why the focus on widows?
Because they were dependent on the other people at anything, really.
Okay. That's it precisely. They, in the culture, again, remember women didn't inherit usually. And so they could, if they were the only survivor of a man, they could inherit, but they didn't normally because there were children involved. And the care of children, the welfare of the children became the first priority. And so therefore there was no provision for a widow. She was given the to marry again. Decrepit, who's going to want?
Father, some old
Yeah, an old. That's true. And what self-respecting woman would want to marry an old decrepit man? Anyway, throughout the Old Testament, you hear a refrain that God has a special love for and a special need for Israel to respond to the needs of orphans, widows, and aliens living in their midst. Orphans, widows, and aliens living in their midst. This is where God's special protective love is directed. And so, and it is because they are absolutely vulnerable in a culture that social welfare whatsoever, and therefore they could be left to starve. And a good self-respecting woman who saw herself as a drain on her family because
Another smoke.
could actually decide to go out into the desert and die, so that she wouldn't be a burden on her family. So there's a special love for widows in the gospel, or in the Bible, widows and orphans.
You know what, Father? I'm listening to some religious radio over these old white Christian men want the women of this country to stay home and take care of the children. They want them back in the old ages. They want them to be dependent.
Do they?
Yes, I think so.
Anyone I know?
You know, that's, I mean, here you would think, yeah, let's women go to work, let them, they might die too.
Oh, okay. Okay, the story is sort of okay. Okay, the story is sort of self-explanatory. The woman is going to provide out of her flour jar and out of her jug of oil for Elijah to live there for more than a year. The widow's son is eventually going to die. And so Elijah is being blamed for taking her son, and he restores the son to life eventually. So this is all part of a circle of stories that amplify the role of Elijah in the culture. Elijah is eventually going to allow the rain to come back. Prophets and their way of approaching the religion of their ancestors. Okay, so Elijah is effective in turning the hearts of people back to the true religion. And you hear that in Jesus' speech as well, who says, in the book of the prophet Malachi, you hear Elijah will come again and turn the hearts of children to their fathers and fathers to their children. In other words, Elijah will come again and restore us to our full status as the children of God. And that's how we get the idea that John the Baptist was Elijah, who brought in and brought about this whole new thing called Jesus. Okay? Good? We don't really need to go through the story any more than that. It's just a story to kind of edify the work of Elijah. Let's take a look at Hebrews. We're finishing up kind of a section in the letter to the Hebrews where Jesus is being compared to the high priest and the priestly sacrifices of Israel. Now, it's important to recognize that the author to the letter of the Hebrews is unknown, and his whole purpose is to compare Jesus and the mission of Jesus with what had been the Jewish tradition of high priesthood and sacrifice. So he's presenting type and antitype. So this gets a little confusing, but the idea is, here's the high priest going to the temple on Yom Yom Kippur, blood of goats with him. He's going to sprinkle the blood on people for the remission of their sins so that they can share in the salvation that God has for them. This once a year Day of Atonement is called Yom Kippur. Okay? Yom Kippur is the day when the priest is allowed to go into the Holy of Holies in the temple and to bring that blood and to sprinkle it on the altar and then to sprinkle it on the people. This is also the feast when the scapegoat is used, where the one goat is sacrificed and the other goat is sent off into the desert with the sins of the people on it. So it's like, let's take all your sins, put them on, go to the desert. To be purified, what's he going to encounter? No, he's going to encounter Satan. Because the abode of the devil, the abode of Satan is the desert. And so you send the goat with the sins out into the desert so he'll be taken care of by Satan. And all his sins will be then eaten up. They'll be gone. So this idea of sacrificial offering, blood, the forgiveness, reconciliation, bringing things together at one meant atonement. At one meant bringing things together. So this sacrifice is supposed to bring people back to their relationship with God. Now, that underlying idea of the celebration of Yom Kippur and the sacrifice of the high priest and the offering of a sacrificial victim for the forgiveness of sins is something that happens yearly, but it's also mimicked in the daily sacrifices that are offered on the altar in the temple. So daily sacrifices are meant to be atoning, that I bring my sheep to the priest to sacrifice on the altar of the Holocaust so that I may be at one with God. So you have the yearly celebration of the forgiveness of the sins of the people, but then you have the local celebrations of sacrifice and the shedding of blood for the forgiveness of one's own sin. Make sense? Okay, so this is the background for the letter to the Hebrews. And so we're looking at 9:24